season of the witch, yeah. Must be the season of the witch.
Ooh, talk about setting the mood. That's a creepy song.
It's a great song.
It is a great song. Donovan's Season of the Witch. But man, think about that when it came out in the 60s. That thing is creepy.
Nice.
And perfect for this week. Welcome. This is the Fright Club Podcast.
I'm Hope Madden.
And I'm George Wolf, and we're from madwolf.com. Check out all the new movie releases, all the new movie reviews at madwolf.com, including the horrible new movie, Gods of Egypt, which my line was, Gods of Awful. But I'll tell you what, I've read some other hilarious reviews of that movie because it is so devastatingly bad. But there are some good ones, and we like to have those as well, and we also like to do a specific concentration on the horror genre once a week right here on the Fright Club Podcast. And boy, I'm looking forward to this one. But we're going to talk about witches, going to talk about one in particular, The Witch, which is not only which is not only racking up, I think it's doing pretty well,
It
right?
is.
At the box office, but generating a lot of conversation among fans, among non-fans, among people who don't really get it, don't really like it. And we'll get to that with somebody who, he says he's not a hater, but he's not a lover either. So we'll kind of go back and forth about what he thought worked and what didn't work. And we just love it, but you know that already. So we'll get to that, The Witches, this week. But first of all, we want to say thank you. Great response. We're so glad we did. We waited for The Witches 1 week and did Black History Month, the best black characters in horror last week.
Yeah, we had a good response for that, and I am glad that we decided to do it. And I wanted to thank Maya, who posted on the Columbus Horror Society Facebook page, that she, and I completely forgotten about this actually, she was hoping to see Danny Glover in Switchback. Totally forgot about the movie.
Yeah, that's the one with Dennis Quaid. An FBI agent tries to catch a serial killer who kidnapped his son. That's the synopsis. 1997. Haven't seen it. Totally forgot about it as well.
Yeah, I forgot. I completely forgot about it. But it is fun to see Danny Glover. I mean, it's just always fun to see Danny Glover, actually.
Oh, yeah. He's always good. But yeah, thank you for that, Maya, and thanks for all the great comments because I think people really appreciated that. It was a chance to talk about just some great actors and some great characters.
Well, I think it's fun every once in a while not to do one that's 5 movies.
It
but,
is.
you know, just to look more closely and at something else.
It is. So that means that we put our favorite witches on hold for 1 week, but here we are. And let's run down, first of all, as we always do, the rules. The rules of the week.
So the first thing is, this is not a countdown of the 5 best individual witches in movies. We're not doing that. And then the other thing we're not going to do is and it was just a way to sort of weed this out. So the movie has to actually have witches in it. So we're not going to do a lot of the witch hunt movies that were actually great. There's some great horror movies about that. Witchfinder General, Mark of the Devil, Black Death with Eddie Redmayne from a few years ago. So it's not going to be any of the movies where, you know, there aren't really witches, but it's the horror of the witch hunt. And then there are others that we kicked around where you kind of got a sort of a coven, sort of a vaguely satanic sort of thing going on. But if it wasn't specifically a coven of witches, so like Kill List, for example, we love Kill List, but it's kind of hard to figure out what exactly the hell that is going on there. And, you know, Wicker Man.
Yeah,
right?
I brought up Wicker Man. I brought up House of the Devil.
Right. Martyrs,
yeah, but no, those don't really. Those kind of fall a little outside what we're talking about here.
Because you don't know. Would I call them witches? I don't know. I don't know if I would or not. And then the only one that I really kicked around putting on here, I decided to leave off The Conjuring. Because, I mean, the demon there, she's a witch. Bathsheba. She's a witch. But the movie is, I don't know, it's more of a haunted house movie. I don't know. I love The Conjuring.
I do too.
But in terms of a witch-centric film, anyway, it didn't make the cut.
Okay, well, that's borderline. But not having it on there leaves it room for something else that we haven't really talked about before. There's at least one of those, 2 of those on the list. So, and we'll get to The Witch, and we're going to bring in our senior Emmy-winning correspondent. That is Mike McGraner. We talked to him. He was with Fritz the Night Owl, the legendary Fritz the Night Owl. He works a lot with Fritz. When Fritz joined us some weeks ago, some programs ago. And I kind of learned through Facebook from his comments, he's not exactly a fan of The Witch, not as nearly as much as we are. So when we got a hold of him about this, he said, well, let's be clear, I'm not a hater. I'm not in all the way. So we're going to talk about that. So we'll get to that on the list, and that should be fun. But let's jump in with number 5 on our list of favorite witch movies from 2014, Starry Eyes.
You're being reborn.
Kill your old life, Sarah. Bury it in the earth. And join us in the skies.
That's me. I'm your girl. I will do whatever it takes for this role.
This is a great one. Very small film, and an actress is trying to make it in L.A. And in a lot of ways, it just gives you a premise that you feel like you know what's going to happen, and in a certain way, it does. She falls in with the wrong crowd, and basically what it comes to is she sells her soul, right? But what I love about this is that the lead character, the person that you're sort of following through this, she's a delicate flower. She's a very fragile person, and she lives in an apartment complex with just a bunch of other young people who moved out to LA, want to make it big, and they sort of make their own movies. They star in each other's movies. They're low budget, indie, raucous group of people, and she's just not one of them. She is going to be a star. And so they don't really like her because they think that she's very snooty, but since she's our point of view character, you just think, no, she isn't. She's just good, and she has integrity, and she's a bit delicate. But as the movie progresses, it's amazing the way the arc shifts, although it doesn't ever feel like anything's been pulled out from under the rug. I mean, the rug's been pulled out from under you. You realize from the beginning that no, she kind of always was a little sketchy, maybe. And there are also a couple of great character actors in this. Maria Olsen, you'll know her when you see her. She plays the casting director in caps. You'll just know her face. She's in hundreds of horror movies, and she has quite a face. And at one point, the lead, Sarah, she goes to an audition, and, they convince her to, on camera, do some things she probably wasn't comfortable doing, and then it looks like she doesn't get the part. And the casting director sneaks in, follows her into the bathroom, and she starts pulling her own hair out. The actress starts pulling her own hair. She has this very weird, and you realize, she's a bit high strung, this one. But the casting director's face is just priceless, and she asked her to come back for a second. It's just awesome, and it wasn't based on the audition. It was based on the freak show in the bathroom.
Well, you know what? It's funny you bring that up, the audition, because apparently that scene was inspired by a story that another, not this actress, but another actress told the director and writer about doing an actual audition for David Lynch.
Wow.
So maybe David Lynch's, that wouldn't shock me.
No.
If his auditions get a little weird.
And you know what? I wonder, so the producer, the actor Louis Desarian plays the producer who's kind of the lead of this coven who's going to convince her to do what she really shouldn't be doing so that she can become famous. And he is so effortlessly creepy. But now that you say that, I feel like maybe he's got a little David Lynch about him. Like maybe he kind of does. And then, where it goes, it takes you to this, black mass sort of horror. And then after that, it just goes nutty. And, it's very bloody after that, and it's just kind of fascinating because it's got a lot of surprises to it.
And it was actually started as a Kickstarter. A lot of projects are these days, and it was aided a lot by fans of the author Chuck Palahniuk from Fight Club.
That's right.
Yeah, a lot of his fans kicked in for this, and the co-writer and director of this movie, Dennis Widmeyer, I guess now runs Chuck's website and has a lot to do with his social media.
Wow!
So they're buddies, and Chuck's fans had a lot to do with getting this thing made, and it is number 5 in our best witch movies, Starry Eyes, and that is from 2014. Number 4 is one we've talked about before and goes back a ways, and I'm really not a huge fan of this movie, but I am excited about what I hear about the remake. But let's go back to 1977 and the original Suspiria.
Roses are red, violets are blue, but the iris is the flower that will mean the end of it.
You can run from Suspiria, but you cannot escape Suspiria. The only thing more terrifying than the last 12 minutes of Suspiria are the first 92.
It's funny. I remember when this came out when I was a kid, and I would go to the theater to see something else. If it was 77, I assume I was seeing Star Wars. And I would see the poster, and the poster said that tagline, the only thing more terrifying than the last 12 minutes of this movie are the first 88 or whatever it is. And I thought, ooh. And then when I finally got around to seeing it, I just was underwhelmed. And I know it's got great, thought of by a lot of fans. It's such a great movie. I never thought, maybe I need to see it again. But the early word on the remake of Suspiria is good, because apparently it's going to be starring both Tilda Swinton, woo! Nice, Dakota Johnson, and is going to be an Italian director who did I Am Love. Is that right? Luca Guadagnino, he said, without any Italian accent whatsoever. So I apologize for butchering that. But that's coming up, I think, 2017, which will be the 40th anniversary. So my hopes are high for that one. But we're talking about the original in 77, and you like it better than I do.
I do. And I mean, neither one of us are huge fans of Italian horror, and neither one of us are huge fans of Dario Argento. I think this is his best movie. A lot of people do, I think. And, it has the earmarks that I'm not a huge fan of in his work, but it's gorgeous. It's so colorful. It's eerie. You've got these really long, big, glorious, cavernous, rooms and these incredibly ornate wallpapers. I mean, it sets such a fractured fairy tale story.
Well, that's interesting, because the word is Argento had his cinematographer watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs,
yes, clearly,
to have model the color scheme, because that color scheme is so saturated.
Yeah.
And all the way back to, what was that, 1937 for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But that's interesting you bring up the fairy tale angle.
Yeah, well, and Jessica Harper has a very Snow White look about her. And it's funny, the same sort of look, I think, you can find in Tale of Two Sisters, which we're going to show in Fright Club in a few months. It gives it a creepy fairy tale feel about it, and that really works well for Suspiria, because it's basically the story of this fragile girl. She's a ballerina, and she's just sort of off on her own, and it's not in an enchanted forest, but it's definitely an enchanted land. And people are dying, and in a very sexualized and boldly red, bloody way, as is usually the way with Argento films. Udo Kier makes a cameo. I love him. I love him in all the things.
Yes.
It just looks great. It just really does. I think that Argento has created an eerie, ethereal atmosphere in this film that I don't think he was able to match, even in they're not exactly sequels, but the other two witch movies that he did, the other two, Mother of Tears and Inferno, the Three Mothers films.
Yeah, that's the trilogy.
Yeah.
That he refers to, the Three Mothers trilogy. But the interesting thing about this movie that I found out was that his original idea for the school was that it would not accommodate girls any older than 12. But then the studio and the producer denied that request, because the film was going to be too violent, involving children, and they thought it would certainly be banned, and that wouldn't hold up. So he raised the age limit of the girls to 20, but he didn't rewrite the script. So the naivete of the characters is still there, childlike dialogue is still there, and also you might look at all the doorknobs on the doors. They're very high up. They're closer to the actresses' heads than doorknobs would be for an adult, and to raise their arms in order to open the doors, just like children would. So it's interesting how he accommodated the producer,
right.
I'm not going to change anything. I still want it to have that childlike quality.
There's something about Italian horror, especially his and Mario Bava's, that and Lucio Fulci in particular, they feel surreal to a certain degree, and I think that Argento establishes that most effectively in this movie, because I think it works better for the film itself than it does really in any of the other Italian films that use that idea. There are a couple of other could be. So the Witch School, right away, it makes me think of The Craft, right, from 1996, which is kind of a favorite. It's not great. It's not
fun.
bad. Anything with Fruza Balk. I mean, she's just such a perfect witch. That's not the first or last time probably she's played a witch. Well, definitely not the first time. But then the other one that I think, especially because of the Italian connection, Black Sunday, right? Mario Bava, Barbara Steele. God, Barbara Steele. She's the best. She's the best. And Black Sunday is not my favorite, but
it's one of the first slasher movies, right?
Yeah. She's just this witch back from the dead to possess and, to also possess Barbara Steele. It's just a fun gothic sort of a standard, but one of the you always have to have one in there where there's actually a witch burning, which is and then in this one she's got the spikes through her face, which is
nice.
So I just want to throw in there a little love for Black Sunday.
But from 1977, the original Suspiria. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the remake because hopefully, I don't know, I should really before between now and then, and I've got over a year, I should really watch the original again because I'm going to think maybe I'll have some more love for it. I just didn't appreciate it at the time. But 1977, Suspiria, number 4 on our list of our favorite witches, and that takes us up to number 3. One that gave a lot of little kids a lot of nightmares in 1990, including one of our friends here on Fright Club, and that is The Witches.
When a little boy accidentally stumbles into their secret world, he finds they've got a lot more power than he ever imagined.
Grandma, it's me, Luke. Luke! They turned me into a mouse.
Now, the witches are on his tail.
Whoa!
And he must scurry around their evil plots. Squeak past every danger. Finally setting the trap that will save the world from the witches.
You are in for a treat.
I think that there is a possibility that I would have overlooked this were it not for the fact that Dr. Neil McMarshall, senior Stephen King correspondent, also known as NACMAC, he tweeted it to us that this should be on here, and I thought that's absolutely true because first of all, Angelica Houston is amazing in this movie, and and it is actually quite creepy. It is really scary. It's based on a Roald Dahl book, and so you've got who did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, among other things, and there are a lot of similarities, right? You've got a little kid who's out of his league and in some danger, and there's the loving grandparent, and the parents aren't really around, and the witches aren't around at all. And there's a great amount of darkness to almost everything that Roald Dahl wrote, but never more than this movie.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's kind of a double-edged sword of his reaction to it. On one hand, he was apparently appalled at the vulgarity, the bad taste, and the actual terror, horror of certain parts of the film, and he wanted his name and his title taken off the film prior to the release, but then he got a very apologetic, complimentary letter from Jim Henson himself, and Dahl, withdrew the threat. But on the other hand, he didn't like that they changed the ending because, spoiler alert, in the ending of the book, Luke remains a mouse. And so they filmed 2 endings. They filmed and of course, which do you think is going to test better? Test screenings, the audiences wanted the happy ending. So you get that Luke is no longer a mouse. So on one hand, he didn't like the vulgarity, but he wanted the more downbeat ending because it was his original book.
That's what he wrote.
Yeah, it's what he wrote, yeah.
And it's a lot of fun, and it's very clever.
Yeah.
But, when they all tear off their heads and they have those...
That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Angelica Houston is terrifying throughout the whole movie. But when they tear those masks off, and you said, it's scary.
Yeah, because through a lot of it, you've got almost that, you've got that Honey, I Shrunk the Kid stuff going on.
Yeah.
When he's a little mouse and
sure.
in the French fries or whatever he's in. But that's it. Because, she's a commanding presence.
Always.
But when they reveal that makeup, which, back then especially took hours, I guess it took her like 8 hours of makeup for that face. That is. And then the way it's shot, it's kind of shot with crazy angles, coming up on them and almost like a carnival, like a House of Mirrors type of thing. I can definitely see where, I was too old at the time, but I can definitely see where kids would be creeped out by that.
Oh, it's a good, creepy, scary witch movie, I think.
So that's number 3 from 1990, The Witches, on our top 5 witch movies. And that brings us up, oh man, we're getting good now. Number 2, the classic, the iconic from 1968, Rosemary's Baby.
What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?
He has his father's eyes.
What are you talking about? Guy's eyes are normal. What have you done to him, you maniac?
Satan is his father, not Guy. Hail Adrian! Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
And didn't we all kind of figure that somewhere a witch was going to look like Ruth Gordon? She's a lovable old lady, but not really.
No. Eat your mouse. I brought you a nice mouse. Oh my God, she is so great. She is so great in that movie. But the whole movie, Mia Farrow's handicapping pregnancy, for me, makes the entire film so uncomfortable to watch.
Well,
she just is the picture of vulnerability.
There's so many things going on. Of course, it's another thought of as another trilogy,
right?
Roman Polanski's trilogy, along with Repulsion and The Tenant. About apartment and city dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
So, boy, that comes into play in this movie, too.
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
And it's a great idea, because, you don't really think of witches as being an urban blight,
right, right.
And it's just I loved the idea of it being, not just any old city. I mean, it's a very upper crust Manhattan. It's just, it was no place you expected to see.
Well, I believe that building was the Dakota.
Yeah, it was
where
Dakota.
John Lennon was murdered.
Dakota.
Yeah.
And but the other thing I loved is that the just absolute lack of glamour. They're just frumpy old people, and then the old women who just want to, get the breast milk, after the baby's born. Just, you know what I mean? And not to say that witches are necessarily glamorous, because they usually seem like hags, but these people are more like cafeteria ladies,
Yeah.
which I loved. I loved it because you think to yourself, well, why exactly have you sold your soul then? I mean, what are you getting out of this exactly? You live in this apartment and I don't understand, but it's just a fascinating take on it, I think.
And one of the things, interesting ways that Polanski shot a scene, the scene where Rosemary was calling Donald, the guy who mysteriously goes blind.
Yes.
Mia Farrow did not know who was going to be speaking the lines on the other end. Turns out it was Tony Curtis. And she didn't know that. And so the scene, she shows some confusion because in reality, she thought the voice sounded familiar because she knew Tony Curtis, but she couldn't place it. So you kind of see that on her face. And it's interesting to hear those stories of how directors play with their cast to get certain reactions.
Yeah.
And not only that, but in the scene where she goes into traffic, apparently that was just real. He just said, go do it. No one is going to hit a pregnant lady.
Wow.
Yeah, which is...
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. But there's so many creepy angles to this movie. And in a way, without getting into the witch, it has that slow build about it.
Does.
Not quite, on par with The Witch, but it has that slow build where if you didn't read the book, if you didn't know what was going on, what is going on?
Yeah.
And her husband is so complicit in this whole thing until you finally get to the fact where she's drugged and they're conceiving, and you see that crazy face, that devilly face, that mask, which, by the way, that costume was later reused in. Have you seen a movie called Asylum of Satan?
No.
From 1972. They reused that suit. So
might have to look it up.
Might have to check that one out.
Yeah.
But, and it's there are parts of that, like that scene, very surreal.
Yeah.
Because she was on drugs. She's drugged up at the time.
Yeah.
But still very surreal. And it
all
just
the
has
dream sequences are really fascinating. And just even the simplest way he used the cinematography, especially inside the building, it was just so evocative. It made you feel like, what's around this corner? Are they going to get around this corner? I want to see what's, it was just masterfully made.
Yeah, and another choice that I think probably a good choice that Polanski made. Originally, one of the producers wanted you to get a final shot of a real grotesque baby, just give you a shot, and they wanted it to remain ambiguous, which I think was a good choice.
I do too, because it's difficult. Anybody who's seen a movie with a zombie baby, it's difficult for that not to come off as comical.
Or that baby in Twilight. Remember that baby?
Oh, my God.
What was her name? Renesmee?
Renesmee?
Oh, my Lord. Awful.
Yes.
But anyway, let's talk about good movies. None other than, we talked about the book. It was written by Ira Levin, I'm not sure. He proclaimed that this movie was, quote, the single most faithful adaptation of a novel ever to come out of Hollywood.
Wow.
Yeah, apparently they just took sections verbatim from the movie, and he was obviously quite pleased with it.
Well, yeah, I imagine he would be. It was clearly a brilliantly written novel then.
Yeah, and it still, it still holds up today.
It definitely does. Yeah, it definitely does. And Mia Farrow's performance is just, it's fragile but it's believable to the degree that she just keeps going back and forth, and you want to yell at her, like, no, you shouldn't feel like that.
Right.
You should feel better than that.
Yeah.
But then they bring her friends over, and it's like they address everything right as you're thinking it. They address it in the film.
And then finally they're out there, and the Ruth Gordon and all the people are out there with the Hail Satans, and they're putting up their drinks.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and she also set off kind of a fashion trend with that haircut.
Yeah.
That was actually, they flew in a young Vidal Sassoon to cut her hair, and it became, the new, what was that, a pixie? What do you call that? Like a pixie cut, whatever. But so it had all sorts of sociological implications.
But the haircut was amazing because what it did was emphasize her frailty. That's what it did.
Yeah.
It made her look less healthy and more fragile. And I loved, the thing about Ruth Gordon is that there's such an absurdity in every scene that she's in. I mean, she plays it comically when nothing else is comedic in the movie.
Right.
And it just makes everything like off kilter, which is perfect because there is something definitely strange afoot.
Yeah, and her voice and her way of delivery is always just kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it puts everything off kilter, and she is so frail looking, and then she's either weak because she's pregnant or hugely pregnant because she's such a small bodied person, or they've got her full of drugs or whatever. And it's total helplessness. And it gives you that creepy feeling pretty much from start to finish. So that was one of the all-timers from 1968, number 2 on our list. And that is Rosemary's Baby, only leaving one room for one at the top. And that is our new favorite from just this year. And I'll tell you right now, we are going to give some spoilers. If you haven't seen The Witch, you might want to put on some Barry Manilow or something and feel better, because we're going to get into this with our special guest, but it is The Witch from this year.
This wilderness will not consume us.
Who's there?
You've cursed this family. This is witchcraft.
She placed a curse on me!
Why have you turned against me?
I saw it.
Your reign of evil!
It's not safe! Not with them!
Think on thy sense.
Ba, ba, ba.
Yeah, we love that movie so much, and we want to get into it in full detail. So once again, let's give you that spoiler warning that there's no real way to get into the real meat and potatoes of this, why it works for us, why maybe it doesn't for somebody else, without giving away some plot points. So fair warning, we will probably do that. And we welcome in, back for his second appearance on the podcast, an Emmy winner for his work with Fritz the Night Owl. It's Mike McGraner.
Hello, thank you.
Hey, glad to have you. And it's funny, when I reached out to you about this, and you said, "Oh, my reputation is preceding me about."
I was scared I was about to become the most hated man on the Fight Club.
No, not at all. I think it's interesting because a movie like this, and when we first started talking about it, and when we were lucky enough to see it, at least a week or so early, we knew right away it was going to be polarizing. It was just going to be one of those movies.
Yeah, honestly, I thought it would be more than it is, although I have talked to several people who just thought it was boring. They were bored out of their minds. And I was at an Oscar panel the other day with John DeSando, who does It's Movie Time on WCBE, and he didn't think it was boring. He enjoyed it, but he wanted it to be metaphorical. He didn't like any of the scenes where it became reality.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about it at length. We don't want to put words in your mouth. So just give us your, what worked for you, what didn't. What's your take on it?
It's interesting what John said, because I kind of agree with that. Here's my stance on the movie. It's a very well acted, very atmospheric drama. Nothing about the movie scared me in the slightest, and that's what kind of disappointed me. And I think ultimately it's just the marketing and the hype behind this, the endorsement by the Satanic Church, yada yada yada. It's marketing at its best, but it didn't deliver on the hype that was in my mind going in. And I think that the biggest problem is, it obviously, you look back to things like The Village, which had by M. Night Shyamalan, and of course when that came out, everyone hated it because it wasn't the horror movie that they were going to see. It was a drama. Didn't mean the movie was awful. It just meant that, it was not your expectations. I think where The Witch would have been terrifying to me is if in the film you would have never seen the witches whatsoever, because the whole point of the story, if we're isolated with the family, if we're right there and we're alone, and their faith is destroying them and they're falling apart, it's a very well acted drama. And then if the girl would have talked to the goat and wandered into the forest to see the witches floating, and then she began to float and smile, that would have been the best like the because you're not sure something's out there. That would have confirmed something was out there without you peeking behind the curtain away from the family and seeing what was out there.
Well, that sounds to me, correct me, that sounds to me like a little bit of a contradiction, because it sounds like you're saying you actually would want even less. On one hand, you're saying not much happens. On the other hand, you're saying I'd like it better if even less happened.
Well, I felt that the couple scenes where you did see the witches in this film I felt like they were put in there because there was nothing happening. Like, I mean, and so that was my other gripe. I think the movie would have been more effective that way. I don't know if I still would have liked it. Because I think my biggest problem is the fact that I was just waiting for something to happen. And another movie I'll reference is Rob Zombie's Lords of Salem, which is not a great movie by any means. I like it because I like Rob Zombie, but there are scenes in that movie where you are startled by something that you catch in the corner of a frame, and it sends a chill up your spine. And even though it may not pay off in Lords of Salem the way you want it to, it's sort of like there were those moments of uneasiness and just like, ooh, like, when you're driving home after the movie, you're a little disturbed. And I guess that's exactly what I expected from The Witch. And while, like, the moment it was over, we watched it at, like, 1:30 in the morning, and the moment it was over, I went upstairs, I turned the projector off, and I went home, and I just didn't feel the least bit creeped out. I felt like I had watched, like, Little House on the Prairie with, like, a rotten apple being thrown up.
Wow.
Oh.
We've said before, horror is a lot like comedy, where, a comedy, either it's funny to you or it's not, and it doesn't really matter. It's like nothing somebody else could say could change that. And I think to find something scary, it's exactly the same way. I've said many times on the podcast, the movie The Blair Witch Project scared me like no other film I had ever seen, because it hit every single one of my personal primal fears. And a lot of other people thought it was the most boring thing they'd ever seen. For me, the way that the unerring authenticity of the movie, it obviously made everybody think of The Crucible. Everybody thought of The Crucible when they're watching this movie. And then the fact that he just upends your expectations in a way that, you're so used to seeing films like this where it's really about zealotry and how your dogmatic following can turn on you and you turn on each other. But in this case, and it's also the isolation of this family, that there really was something, to me, was just a fascinating and incredibly creepy turn. And then the other thing is, by the end of the film, when she talked to the goat, you're thinking to yourself, I hope that goat talks back, because what else is she going to do? And then you're like, how bad off could it be that I'm hoping the goat talks back? Like, it's got to be a worse decision, but what else is she going to do? And that is to me, so unsettling, that there was a part of me that hoped the goat would talk back. It's a part of me that hoped Satan was going to give this woman a deal. That was just the most unsettling idea to me.
When you say that, it is interesting. I'm with you 110% on the Blair Witch, and that's another one. We were talking about it as a staff. It was one of those things where I brought up the Blair Witch, and I said the scariest thing about that is, in the end, when you saw the guy standing in the corner,
yes,
you knew. That terrified me, because it's like there is no hope. There is this, and I guess, but again, if you think about that, the Blair Witch and this are very similar, and the fact that there wasn't much that happened in the Blair Witch. Like, they found that little, I think it was a tongue and teeth in the handkerchief.
Right. Exactly, yeah.
There were just a couple little things, very similar. The difference is, we didn't know if there was a witch. We knew something was out there, and we didn't know till the end that it is the story repeating itself and making the kids stand in the corner while the other one's killed, and I guess the fact that you kind of knew, oh my God, there's the reality of it, there is a witch, was scary, and equally terrifying in The Witch. But again, we knew the witches were out there. We had seen them on screen earlier, and I guess it's kind of like the family didn't see them. The family didn't know where their baby went, and I think that if we were stuck with that, if we were with them and we were banished and we didn't get to peek on the other side of the woods, it would have just been more effective, I think. So, I don't know.
And plus, I kind of get a feeling with not only The Witch, but going back a couple of years with It Follows, even, and movies like that. I guess what they're calling indie art house horror.
Babadook.
The Babadook. They get these build-ups, and number one, you've got the whole, today's internet, mindset where no, if it's popular, I'm going to rip it down. But then I'm not sure it's fair to, knock a movie down for the hype, because aren't those two separate things? You've got the hype and the movie itself.
On the other hand, I do think it's happened to me before where I'm so disappointed in a film because my expectations were high. And it's not necessarily the fault of the movie, but that doesn't change the fact that I didn't like it because I thought I would like it more.
Yeah.
This is 110% my messed up head, because I guarantee. Enough people like this. It's an 83% of Rotten Tomatoes. There's no way that this is a bad movie. This is just. I had a friend who saw it at Sundance, not this year, but the year before, and he came back just terrified and said, and so he told me over a year ago that it was one of the most terrifying movies he has ever seen. And so that's my fault, because for a year I could not wait to see this.
Well, but I can also tell that you have the respect for how well it's put together.
Sure.
The look of it and the production values are astounding.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The movie, as I said, if they would have said, this is a very powerful drama, I almost, you could have put the same movie in front of me and I would have been like, awesome. I don't know. It's just a weird. It's all the expectation. I think it's not. I think of movies like The Exorcist or The Shining or Suspiria, and those slow builds that pay off, and then you listen to The Witch, and these reviews are like one of the most terrifying movies ever made. And I guess that's where I was just like, aren't you going a little, aren't you sending people in a little high? You kind of want to send them in low and then have it scare the hell out of them. Mm-hmm. So
okay. Where do you fall? Do you think it's fair to group this in with the movies like The Babadook and It Follows?
I don't know. I'm super fan of both of those movies.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a tough, It Follows especially is just, I can't watch that enough. It's such a great atmospheric, the score and everything looks like fall, and the neighborhood looks like the neighborhood you grew up in as a kid. It's just it hits home so much. And The Babadook is just, the whole metaphor in that movie, I think, is amazing.
Yeah.
Me dealing with depression, friends I've had dealt with depression, and just the depression and grief that The Babadook represented, I thought was just genius.
Well, I think it's interesting that you don't really consider The Witch a horror movie. I get a lot of grief on this podcast for movies that I say, no, that didn't make the list because I don't think it's a horror movie. And this, to me, from the moment that baby is gone, and then that, the bathing scene after, it's a horror movie to me. It is. And oh my God, the creepy twins. Yes, please. Every time they did that, I was like, ah!
No, I will tell you that enough people. Me hating on this movie on the internet is definitely at this point for humor purposes, with the Columbus.
Sure.
Or anytime I see someone put a comment up, it's like playful sparring, and I don't actually think bad of anybody who likes this movie.
Oh no!
So you're admitting you're a troll.
Well, I'm admitting I'm a troll to my friends. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. It's all loving.
Yeah, it is.
I'm glad the movie exists. I'm obviously it's an indie film, and I'm glad it's making all this money. That's awesome. So I'm glad people are passionate about it. I'm really glad it scared them, because that gives me hope that anything just a little bit terrifying is going to really scare people, so I can't wait for that movie to come out.
Fair enough. Well, Mike McGraner, our senior Emmy-winning correspondent.
Our only Emmy-winning correspondent.
Well, he can be our senior.
Right.
Or no, I guess Fritz would be the senior, so
right.
he's the junior.
That's right.
Okay, so we're demoting you right now.
All right.
Hey, thanks for the insight. I appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so a little bit of a dissenting opinion. Obviously, he doesn't hate it.
No.
But he doesn't like it.
He acknowledges that it's a very well-made film. It just didn't scare him.
I don't know how you can't.
No.
Even if it doesn't scare you,
absolutely.
It's such a well-made film.
It is.
Even if it doesn't scare you. And by the way, if you have your own thoughts, or if you like this type of conversation, I really have to recommend a column on, I think it's medium.com, written by a guy named Jason Kaufman. Been shared around some of the horror sites, as you can definitely find it on the Columbus Horror Society that we frequent. The guy has just great thoughts about this whole pushback to indie art house horror, and how he's hoping that the two camps can coexist without cannibalizing each other.
It is a really well-written article. I think it's called This is Why We Can't Have Nice Things.
Right.
It was great.
So check it out. It's very, very interesting. And by all means, let us know where you come down on this, on The Witches, if there's something we missed, or where you come down on The Witch itself, the movie. Let us know. Twitter, of course, we're at Mad Wolf, MADDWOLF. Facebook, we're Mad Wolf Columbus, and we always love to hear from you.
So as of right now, I don't think we've really landed on next week's topic. We got a couple kicking around, but we haven't, entirely decided. I know the week after that what we're doing.
There we go. It's going to be our next Fright Club Live.
That's right. And we're going to count down the 5 best Irish horror movies. And we're going to show a really super fun creature feature called Grabbers.
Yeah, and we're going to drink, and we're going to take a shower with Irish Spring, and we're going to
eat our Lucky Charms.
And get in the whole spirit. So, no, it's going to be a lot of fun. So, please, if you're in the area, again, it's the Gateway Film Center on High Street in Columbus right there, the Ohio State University campus. And we have a ball. We've got some great people, always inviting new Fright Clubbers out, meeting new people all the time. I think last time we met Alex and Rebecca.
And Q.
Some new members. So please come out and join the fun. It's always a blast. And keep in contact until Fright Club next week.
I'm Hope Madden.
And I'm George Wolf. And this is the Fright Club Podcast.
Stay frightful, my friends.
And stay witchy.
Must be